Okay, so how do I post my stuff on Instagram? And I'm saying this about my adopted dad. Okay, so I got this picture on YouTube. I'm gonna type it up on Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan. You're gonna see when you type up Richard Nixon on YouTube, you'll find my video. Ronald Reagan, Marilyn Monroe, Emilio Piccanini, and Ray Kroc. Now, this is a situation I can understand if you see this video. I am going to say my name is Mike Monroe Beasley, but I'm born from Ronald Reagan as a son from a secret affair. And yet, Richard Nixon is my grandpa, and Marilyn Monroe is my grandmother. The man who adopted me worked for George Bush Sr., went by Emilio Piccanini and Ray Kroc, and also found her Jack in the Box, and also wrote a check. Now here's another thing you're going to find out about me that you don't even know. Rick and Kathy Hilton. Now when I say that, I wish they would watch this video. Rick and Kathy Hilton, how you doing? Since 1991, well, first I was introduced to you at 4 years old and called y'all Uncle Rick and Aunt Kathy. Now, for some reason I feel that I won winning money. It was an NFL bet that I won as a child. Well, there was this estate that you and Rick, Kathy and Rick stayed on. That was one horses and traded drive that Margaret and Carl let them live. And they're the Carters. They're my adopted aunt and uncle. Now, I'm going to walk and show you that, first of all, I'm not going to show you the hotel until I tell you the story. Okay. Now, for some reason, when we stayed at the Beverly Hilton, Rick blurted out that I had winning money. And my adopted dad is Tom, Emilio Piccanini, and Ray Kroc decided to ask me, Rick, how would you feel if Rick and Kathy asked you for some winning money to purchase the Beverly Hilton? I said, what happens if I don't give them the money and help them out with money? Well, Rick and Kathy and Paris and Nikki might be homeless. Boo, boo. They did get homeless today. As I was here standing at Beverly Hilton as a child, my adopted dad brought me to Irvine and showed me an office, corporate office that he wrote a check to start, which had the two signs on it, Bank of America and Wells Fargo. It said, keep a secret from Selma, Carl, Cassie, and John. Never to say. So that day, at that night, he brought me to Yerba Linda to make me meet my grandpa the next day, but see him in McDonald's that night, eating at McDonald's when he was standing next to him. The next day, I went to visit and find out that Richard Nixon is my grandpa. Then he tells me that Marilyn Monroe is my grandmother. So all of a sudden, we go back to the Beverly Hilton, and once we get back, that's when I find out that he's going to bring me to Santa Fe, which the estate of Ray Kroc and Joan Kroc is right located there, next to Selena Beach and Del Mar. And so he made copies of keys for me when he saw Joan and told her to give him the keys to make a copy. And then he brought me to the locksmith that was around McDonald's, around Selena Beach and Del Mar. That's not so far from the racetrack and arena that he paid to put there as he's Ray Kroc. Also, he told me he owned the Windy Circle Hotel and the resort. So when we went straight and he placed the keys with the locksmith was supposed to keep those keys. So he told the locksmith when I turned 18 and he sees me, we were going to go down together and pick up the keys. But if he passed away, there were keys in the water sprinkler system. That was at the Goldwell Preview International Banking. Well, it turns out we came back to the Beverly Hilton after I saw him dance with Joan Kroc and play something for me to look at, to think I have to open up some type of lamp shop because he spent money to have a lamp shop that's next to Petco's, which he started Petco's. He wrote a check to start Petco's and Costco, and plus we have a baseball stadium. But, so we came back here, and this was when we were going to party at 146 Train. We had to pick up Glenn Larson here as well. Glenn Larson basically knew my dad and was good friends, and he's the creator of Knight Rider and Battlestar Galactica and Automan. Well, it turns out I met Glenn when I was 4. and yet knew Glenn till the age of 10. I asked Glenn when he purchased Firebird Brown Bottom. I said, Uncle Glenn, does the car talk? Is it Autobot? He goes, no, Ricky, but that's giving me a show idea to start. Well, after I ran my mouth through Uncle Glenn Larson, he went straight starting that ride. Well, to be real quick, that I went straight back and understood when we came and picked up Glenn here. We walked down, me and him walked this way as father and son. And he says, Ricky, I wrote a check to start this hotel and name it. Could you read the sign? I said, okay, Daddy. I thought it was the Paramount because I thought it was P, but it was an F. He said it's the Paramount Maryland Hotel. Now, I said, so you wrote a check and started this and you own it? He's like, yeah. But now I'm giving you the hotel because the reason why you gave Rick and Kathy money to own the Beverly Hills. This was 1991. Would you like to see the hotel I was supposed to own before he died that he was going to give me? It's standing right behind me. Carl, Kathy, and John, my siblings, did not know how rich and wealthy he was. He purchased crude oil using the Transamerica checks because he worked for George Bassine. But what's most important, after he passed away, and I walked and became homeless. I forgot what kind of investor I was. I invested in the stock with my winning money as a child, and actually he used Donald Trump to put the money to what considers to be the United Arab Emirates. I'm going to tell you another story. 1990, it had to be in 91. Had to be in that year that I walked into the house to find the Arab sitting on the couch. I thought we were getting robbed, but it turns out the Arab said, no, Ricky, I'm not here to rob you. Your dad knows George Bush Sr. personally, and I'm here to have a conference with George Bush Sr. on how to protect the Arabs from Saddam Hussein. It turns out Sheikh Rashid Al Maktoum is his name. Well, it turns out my dad brought Sheikh to a conference with George Bush Sr. as he's my adopted father. And he advised the Arabs to sell in Dubai that he will find a way to pay for the crude oil if it's taken because they kept on burning the oil fields. Well, it turns out Sheikh left and took my Tiger blanket when he went back to Dubai because there were guests at our house. And the way I see it, I considered that my adopted dad said, okay, the next thing that he comes back telling me is that George Bush Sr. asked him to expect a Chevron plant east of Houston. And what happened was, when that Chevron plant was expected, he came back telling me he wants to stop working for George Bush Sr. because he doesn't want the job no more. And yet, knowing that I'm the only one that knows the secret. So he decided to move us from Houston, Texas to Lafayette. And when we got to Lafayette, we lived in one house and then lived in another because he said he wanted to secretly say that I own that house, but yet he wanted to move us in another house because he wanted to make sure that I could come back to that house instead of staying there. If anything happens to him, they wouldn't think that the family members would screw me out my own estate, which is in Lafayette. To be brief on the situation, is that when I got older and I found out that we were living in Lafayette, I find myself to understand that I took it to understand. I was watching X-Men when he walks in the house from work after he was supposedly going to separate. He lost a lot of weight and looked different. He was separated from Selma, living in an apartment. So when he moved back into the house and he started working for the Marriott in Lafayette, I think that's where it was. And it turns out he tried to make Selma think that we weren't so filthy rich with all the investments he did. So turns out that he turns the channel to find out the World Trade Center got bombed in the car garage. Well, after he heard that, he went straight called Bush Sr., who was in the White House, personally on his phone, to the White House, to Bush Sr., because they're close friends, and he's a close one that's being a supporter, who was a secret founder of all the companies he wrote a check to start. Now, it's a little cold out here. I have all these people talking around. They don't know who I am standing here at all. So what happens is, The minute that I see this, he comes to me and says, "You still have winning money, Ricky? The baseball stadium that you invested money, which I invested into the AT&T baseball stadium to be constructed for the Giants as a child, never to be advertised that I was a little big spender with my winning money as a child." Well, it turns out he asked me to invest money into Wall Street. He was close friends with Donald Trump. He decides to ask Donald to do him a favor, send our winning money to Merrill Lynch and Charles Schwab, and he told Donald Trump to start his own little account too, so he can come to my adopted dad if his dad passed away and didn't leave him anything. So it turns out when Donald did the favor, he ended up telling me that he told Donald to report the sins not to go to the United States Credit Bureau, but to send it to Shaika Receipts. And he advised Shaika to start a banking system for the U.S. since they attacked the World Trade Center. He felt that that World Trade Center was going to fall in 1993 or 92. And so turns out that Shaika agreed. So then he tells Shaika, since all the companies that he wrote a check to start, I think he also pushed companies there to start. He also told me that he wanted to start a shoe store, which sold sporting good shoes. Well, I named it Kids Foot Locker. Then he said he had a health spot that he had not named. So I named it LA Fitness. And he tells me I'm supposed to be a little secret founder and owner of LA Fitness, which, by the way, I experienced a year later, which I explained about that when I get finished with the conversation of this. So, this is one thing I push, is that he walked me here, showed me the security cameras, and see, one thing about it is when we had the party here, Margaret and Carl Karcher, Margaret attended. Margaret Karcher was the wife to Carl Karcher. Also, Glenn Larson attended. And I think Sergio Aragonis, who's an artist of Mad, he's also a friend of my adopted dad. Well, he walked me under that camera and pointed. That has been there since I saw that at 1991. That right there. So when my adopted dad showed me this property, this was 1991 that he showed me, I looked at myself like, I'm going to end up owning all this and back. Well, turns out when he told Shaika to bank the cents and send us crude oil, that he didn't have to write any checks from Transamerica, I feel he also, in that time period, wrote a check to start Costco and Petco. And he told me when he was alive, he said when the baseball stadium makes more money, he said he's going to ask Shaika to, in the future, sell the baseball stadium to whoever wants to purchase it and take the money to construct a football stadium for the Cowboys. So Shaika wrote that down as a memo, as he's the now Prince of Dubai, which back then, this was 1993, that Dad was still alive. Dad even told me that we were supposed to have a building constructed from the baseball stadium, which is a building that sits in San Diego with a Scantron screen that has Luma on it. That's another business investment that was done. So it turns out he comes to me also and says he started Johnny Rockets 1986 by writing a check. And so he also, and so with my winning money, when he was alive till 92, he wrote a check to start Water Grill, BOA Steakhouse, Beyond Ocean, Hillstone, Elephant Beach Club, and so also having Jack in the Box. And the way I see it, I don't know how much more investment is considered to come from that. But whatever I feel, I think all that money went straight to Transamerica or got banked to Dubai, which is Shaika Al Maktoum. And so as he passed away, and I went straight moving, I went straight left and was kicked out because after we left Lafayette, we moved to Church Point, I went straight to school and found to be classmates with Calvin, who is Snoop Dogg, Mark Wahlberg, who is Donnie Wahlberg's brother in class. And I thought I was going to become a group with Mark Wahlberg and Donnie Wahlberg, Calvin. But Calvin went straight, spent the night one night, stole some money from the safe that my dad and me had winning money in. So my brother found him, took some money back, and he ended up using that money to record rolling down the street, smoking Indo, sipping on gin and juice. And I got kicked out because I skipped school. So I was kicked out at the age of 17. And so I went straight to Houston first to see if I could stay around my sister Kathy, but she didn't want to. So I came back to live with Selma, then decided to take a trip all the way and decided to hitchhike to California, where I met Tim McCall, stayed at Tim McCall's house, and well, I worked with his trucker first, and then lived at Tim McCall's house, who worked for Disney. As I was at Tim McCall's house, I'd say 1998, Tim decides to go drive George Lucas around from Star Wars, in which I didn't know he was George Lucas until the third time that I saw him in the passenger seat. And then one day we go pick up a guy whose name is Brad Pitt to bring to another guy's house who I heard his first name being George. The 3 times we visited, and he brought and picked up Brad, I would be in the back seat, Brad would be in the front. Brad took a picture of me at the age of 19 that sits right up in my Instagram page. And so it turns out that when I finally found that I was at George Clooney's house, the third time, George came out and said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Myrick. I go by Ricky. I'm Tim's friend." He said, "Well, why you have so many names?" I said, "Because I'm adopted." He said, "You were in foster care?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Who's your mother?" I said, "Arlene Delma." He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Come back and talk to me personally." So when I did, I talked to him personally, and he tells me that he's my stepbrother, that he kept a secret, he was in foster care. And so it turns out, this when Gus was very cold, I ended up having to deal with an issue that I went back to Tim's house, and Tim tells me he's not the real George Clooney, that he's gay. And so all of a sudden, I find myself to get brought to, okay, here's another thing that I almost forgot. 1991, I met Tom Hanks when we were going to party at the 146 N-Trade, and when I gave money to Rick and Kathy Hilton. And Tom, as he's a Emilio Piccinini, and Ray Kroc, who's my adopted dad, tells me a secret that Tom Hanks is supposed to be his biological son from Joan Kroc that wasn't reported to be born. Now, I can understand that when I got older and I didn't remember, he tells me when we left Beverly Hills and went back to Houston that year of 1991, we moved to Lafayette, and he tells me, as he's my adopted father, he says that Tom Hanks is going to be coming around us and some family saying his name is Jerry. So you have to keep a secret that Tom Hanks is Jerry. So when I started to see Jerry as Tom Hanks, I didn't say nothing to Carl, Kathy, and John. It is almost like how I met Margaret sometimes in DeQuincy. Margaret Carter would not say that she's Margaret around John, Kathy, and Carl, or Selma. She would say her name is Andy, because she didn't want Carl, Kathy, and John, and Selma knowing that she is Margaret Carter, the wife of Carl Carter. Now, Carl says I was the only one in the family that knew that she was Margaret Carter in the house in DeQuincy. And so I met Carl out here in 1991 around Carl Jr.'s, around the LAX airport, and understood that was just a one quick meeting. And supposedly, as we're at that restaurant, my adopted dad placed the bike and tied a wire around it and said, "When you come back this way, you're going to grab this bike," which I forgot years later. And Carl tells me I'm supposed to come there when I get older. I looked at him like, how is it possible? I was only 10 when I met him at the restaurant. So the next time I saw Carl, which I forgot, when my adopted dad passed away, the people that attended the funeral, I hope that Rick and Kathy, I do have a vivid visual of seeing Rick and Kathy Hilton attending the funeral. I don't know if Glenn Larson attended the funeral or Sergio Aragones, but I did see, when I played piano, Barbara Bush standing behind me saying, "Son, would you like to play another, because you sound good?" Now, I know it's 19 minutes and 40 seconds count, and I got to see that it just won't get fit up onto Instagram. So I'll set this up on YouTube. And so what comes down to it is now, when after his passing, and I met George, I went straight moving and found myself to have left and met Merrick Hutchinson when I came back to live around Selma. And then Kathy tells me that we found my real father. And I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense because in the back of my head, I don't know, I think it was 1998. I did note that I have a recalling memory of meeting Ronald Reagan in Cha 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 Chicken saying that he is my father, but giving me the name Devin. And I could put it in the back of my head because Tim McCall brought me to around Shutters on the Beach saying that my grandpa Richard Nixon was around the areas of Shutters of the Beach and Castle Del Mar in Santa Monica, which you have to Google the area. Just look for Cha 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 Chicken, Caribbean foods. It is upon the ocean, or you can just look at the fact that it's this colorful place. I have the picture up when I raised it. Now it turns out that the second time I met Ron, now this is what happened. I got from moving out of America because he pointed a gun at me and told me to leave in 1999 because I was working at Burger King. So I went straight back to LA, and I noticed that I decided to live at Tim's house, and for some reason I thought, okay, now I'm in California, but I'm thinking about jumping back to go to Selma's house, but I wasn't too sure just yet because I had moved from Eric's house and then left and went to go straight do I think it was Job Corps or so, and so in the reluctant, it's the story really is about this hotel, but yet it comes further that I was supposed to inherit the Ray Kroc Jones estate. Now this comes together as when I pushed the first speech out, which is going to be uploaded. This is 21 minutes 53 seconds counting. I feel that the situation that came to me as I saw myself and went straight, moved to Chicago. I was homeless when a African American female came to me, a woman, and said, my daughter's looking for a white boy to date. And so I was like, oh really, that's something. So when I got to the Dearborn Project, I met Angela Taylor and thought this is something that she wants to date a white boy, but I'm just here to get a roof over my head. I'm not sure if I'm gonna date her. But then it came to the story that she decided to play like she liked me, all because I had a job. I can go straight and understand that I didn't get years later that she was set up by a man that hit my mom off the road. Now I'm going to explain this much, is that when I stayed at Merrick Hutchinson's house, when I thought he was my father, but didn't have the relapse memory that Ronald Reagan told me that he was my father after meeting Merrick, it had to been that he said this. Merrick pointed the gun at me and decided to scare me off the property for some argument about a cat being in the bathtub. And he's like, don't boss my wife around. And so when I left Alexandria, Louisiana, where he was staying at, I went straight back to California and said, okay, I'm going to see how Tim feels about this. Came back to see Tim and note that I might have met Ronald that time. But then all of a sudden, Tim brings me to Long Beach, and he was hanging out with his friend up in Ocean, which is on Ocean Boulevard, and it's like next to the ocean. And it turns out his friend says, you want to meet Tom Hanks? So he got me in the car, drove me, which I didn't remember that Tom Hanks was around us there as a child. So as I got to the estate, I went straight sitting at the this chair, and Tom comes in the room with a beard, with shorts on, sits down and says, so how do you like my legs? I think you're a little hairy. Not remembering that Tom was around me as a child, as Jerry. And so all of a sudden he says, I heard that you're related to Richard Nixon. I know a state that your grandpa stayed at. He left the door unlocked. I want to show you. So we got him in the car and we went straight to the state, which I have a picture of in one of my Instagram posts before my phone got stolen. I had no way to access back into that one. And it turns out I went straight to understand that last year, when it came down to forgetting all this stuff about me and being related and people trying to tell me my adopted father and forgetting that I forgot that Margaret and Carl Karcher were my adopted aunt and uncle. I walked down the street to find 146 Entrada, as condemned as it is, and had a relapse memory that that place was supposed to be given to me by Margaret Karcher. And so I slept in front when it was raining and thinking, my God, I've been here. I think as if Margaret supposedly was going to give me the place. I think she's supposed to. Well, this man by the name of Ted Kaplan calls the police. I get woken up. My hand hits the window and actually breaks it because I got woken up my dead, like deep sleep. And so I found out that I remember a relapse memory about when we were at the party in trade in 1991. I remember Margaret walked across the street and told Ted to take the signs down that Rick and Kathy do not have the authority to sell the estate to Ted Kaplan when the house caught fire. And so when I decided to last year, I walked to go to Superior Court LAX and missed the court date. A voice in my head told me to go straight to where was that? Anaheim. And so go around Disney is what I kept on hearing. I don't know why I kept on hearing go to Disney. So when I went to Disney, I found another state that my friends Tim McCall or Harry, who he takes care of, said he gave me a state 1998 that I could go and have, and I told Harry I'll wait until he passes away because I wasn't sure about that year if he was real on that. So I found out Harry Taylor passed away, and so when I found the place was still condemned, it was called the Broiler. I started to think, yeah, Harry did give me this place because he said one day he told me that he wanted me to have the whole estate that's on across from Joe's Italian Ice Cream. Well, when I found the estate, I walked in the back and slept there for a while. I got a recorder of me up in that place going, yeah, da, da, da. And this is one of my posters, So, turns out that I woke up one day, get a knock at the door because I'm staying in the back storage part where it's almost like either fridge storage. It's the back storage space that was unlocked. I changed the locks and said I own the place because I know there's nobody that's going to argue with me because Harry gave it to me. And it turns out this Asian Filipino comes walking out the back thinking he's got keys, but I think he jumped the fence to get into the place through a glass sliding door. So then when these Mexican Latino gangbangers that own the house in the back saw me, they called the police and decided they want to try to see who I am. They think I'm a homeless person. I kept on telling them Harry Taylor gave me the place. So the officer came and I told the officer that I'm related to Richard Nixon, Marilyn Monroe, and also Ronald Reagan, but yet my adopted dad is Tom Beasley, and I think he's also said his name is Emilio Paganini and Ray Kroc. So when they put me out of jail, I went straight, walking down the street and saw McDonald's and went straight to McDonald's and had a relapse memory. I was there as a kid at age 4, seeing my dad having a relapse memory, seeing him walk in, saying hi, and they all said, hey Ray, like I was looking at the fact they said he was Ray Kroc when he walked in the McDonald's. I was the only child that was sitting in the seat. And so the minute that I told the manager, I said, manager, my dad is actually Ray Kroc, but his name, he goes by as Tom Beasley, but he's also Ray Kroc. The manager's like, well, the thing about it is I can't service you because you've been asking customers for change. I said, no, I haven't. And so the minute that I called the cops, the same officer that picked me up that I told that was a Harry Taylor came straight, and I said, officer, I know you, and he goes, yeah, I know you. You're the one that's related to Richard Nixon, Marilyn Monroe, and also Ronald Reagan, and you say your dad could be Emilio Paganini or Ray Kroc. And I tried telling the manager that. He goes, well, and the manager doesn't want you eating here. I understand I got to do what the manager says. So this is what came out of his mouth. So how about you go to your aunt and uncle's establishment? I said, what are you talking about? He goes, why don't you go eat at Carl's Jr.? Aren't you related to Margaret and Carl Karcher? I said, how'd you get that information? He goes, well, since you say you're related to Ray Kroc, I guess that's what I heard, And so I didn't really think it. So I went to Carl's Jr. and ate there because I couldn't get service at McDonald's. So all of a sudden, I'm sleeping around for like 3 months to figure how I'm gonna prove the case about the Harry Taylor estate, that the bull is supposed to be mine. And it turns out that's when all of a sudden I Googled up to see where the Ray Kroc and Joan estate is at. So when I found it on the map, I went straight, getting on the bus past my grandpa's estate, which is the San Clemente, which is, I went straight past San Clemente, got on foot, and started walking 60 miles all the way to Carlsbad, and found myself around Salina Beach and Del Mar. And when I got to the area where the McDonald's was at, that's when I had the relapse memory that my dad had me there, as he's my adopted father, saying he's Ray Kroc, making keys for me to find when he passes away. Well, when I went to the locksmith said they didn't have the keys. The locksmith that was working there in 1991 does not work there no more. So he's a new locksmith and they don't have the keys. And so I went straight to go check the water sprinkler system. As I got there, then I went straight to San Diego to see San Diego. I walked down to Little Italy and found the ship, the Midway, and I remember he told me that he served the Midway and the Jeremiah Bryant, and then all of a sudden I remember he showed me the Wyndham Hotel and he wrote a check to start that. So when I went straight walking downtown San Diego, I started thinking, my dad to be Ray Kroc, he owns the Padres. I wonder if the baseball stadium, and this is what gets to me, the Petco Park is a part of the situation. My adopted dad, I think Shaka also did this. He went straight, used the money to construct a baseball stadium and name it the Petco Park, when he also was told to put a football stadium for the Giants when he said the money makes more into the account. So this is what was consistent. When I got back here, and I started thinking, then I started coming up with a conclusion that I think that Ted Kaplan killed my father, who considers to say he's a Medio Piccaninny, and then went straight after and killed my Aunt Margaret because she came around the state to tell Ted to pull the signs down. I found out that she was found, or supposedly reported to have passed away in Arizona, where she stays in DeQuincy. Carl Cox was another one I think that Ted Kaplan killed. This year, my adopted mother also passed away, and I think it was because I went straight to court to see about how to fight the case against Ted Kaplan, and he doesn't own it. That I own 146 and Trader Drive, Santa Monica, California. And so it turns out I started to get this vision that I think Ted Kaplan was working for Transamerica when my dad said he was a Medio Piccaninny. And when he reported to the company, when they reported to the company that he passed away, but he was still alive, he went straight, ran for mayor. So I have a feeling Ted Kaplan recognized that he was still the owner that was alive, but tried to see about find a way to keep him from being mayor. So he shot at my adopted dad, who was mayor of San Francisco, and he packed his bags, and then they moved into Entrada. He moves in Entrada with Margaret and Carl to start the restaurant. So I think Ted followed him from San Francisco to here, to Santa Monica, and lived across the street, spying on him, trying to run out that he is still alive as the founder of Transamerica. So what my adopted dad does is leave the estate, because Margaret and Carl and him had ran the restaurant with Joan. And supposedly, when he decides to, he moves down to Salina Beach, writes the check to purchase McDonald's, and then starts a racetrack, arena, and a hotel, and then decides to start the Wyndham Hotel, which is in San Diego. I noticed this now. This is one thing I forgot to add. When we started making money as father and son with the investment of the Wall Street, my adopted dad asked me to invest money into Disney in 1992 or 93 when the World Trade Center attacked. And it turns out Disney was about to shut its business and its parks down. So he calls George Bush Sr. and he asked me, since we have a lot of money, why don't we just purchase Disney and I could put you as a secret owner of Disney. I don't know if I still own Disney, but this was a story told to me that he ended up spending money and purchased all of the Disney company and the parks. Also, my adopted dad, supposedly founder of Paramount Pictures, considered that he wrote a check and started that. He's a secret founder that did that. And so, and plus there are three estates. There's the Act for Entertainment that I'm supposed to inherit. That's that estate that is sitting on the side of which is a white. It's next to a white hotel on the ocean, and it's like next to Arizona. You just turn the corner. There's a white hotel, and then the house with a pointy top. Well, that estate is called Akron Entertainment. It once was owned and was used by my grandmother, Marilyn Monroe, but then when she passed away, it turns out Ronald, who's my biological father that I'm born from the secret affair, used that house. So he decided to give it to my adopted father to start a business. My adopted father had Act for Entertainment at that spot because that's where he picked actors to act for Paramount Pictures, is what I recall my memory to be. And so the thing about the Marimore is I looked at the fact, also the Beach Club. I remember as we had the party at 146 in Trader when I gave money to Rick and Kathy Hilton as a child. He tells me that Margaret wants to give me the Beach Club that is sitting on Will Rogers State Beach. I never did ever check the impression, but when we purchased Disney, he made more money, and we decided to put a hotel there. He decides to pay for a hotel to be constructed there. I named it the Castle Inn and Suites, and so I don't know if I'm supposed to own that. This was all 1993 that he explained it. But one year, when I brought my supposed cheating wife, who is in the picture, she's African American, we were homeless, and I was able to get into Disney for free and didn't understand that time. And when we got into Disney, I said it's because I know Tim McCall works for Disney. He's a magic and lighting show. That's what I thought I got into Disney for. But it's the fact my name is Ricky Beasley. And the thing about it is I told the Disney attendants because they saw us with a wristband, and I thought they were going to chase us at the park, but they didn't. So when I was there, they told me there's a hotel that's inside the park that they're going to tear down, but you could stay there and it was still a business. But we did not pay any rent. We got to stay there for free. So when we walked out the hotel the next day, we walked outside of Disney Park, and my cheating girl at that time, which I didn't know she was cheating, she was going around sleeping with other guys when I didn't have the money, but being two-faced, decided to say, I wonder if we can get in Disney Adventure for free. And so it turns out she goes and asked them and said what my name is, and all of a sudden I found myself to get in that park for free. So then the Disney attendant came and said, hey, I know a hotel where you can stay where you don't have to pay rent, and they'll let you stay. And I didn't know why, but I could understand. When I got to that hotel, somebody knocked on the door that night and said, we're not the cops, we have something for you, Mr. Beasley, as I'm laying in bed. And I said, maybe I'll deal with it tomorrow. When I went straight to the desk clerk at Castle Inn and Suites on Harbor, he said, you don't have to turn in your keys, you're stupid, Mr. Beasley. I said, why is that? It's because you just don't have to. So I said, can I have my state ID back? He goes, no, you can't. That was, I think, 2001 or year 2000 when we came. So the thing about it is after that investment with Disney, which was 1993, that he told me about when he was alive, he also decided to purchase a power company and tie in the account to the power company. So me and him as father and son were supposed to own a power plant down south of San Diego, which I think all that account is tied into Shaka-Rashid. But it's no coming. This is a relapse memory that I have of all the money that I spent as a big investor. Anyway, I'm finished speaking.